How could a tiny volcanic island cost more American lives per square mile than almost any other battle in history? This was Iwo Jima, and in February 1945, American Marines were about to face one of the most horrific battles of World War II. And to survive this hell, they would turn to one of the most terrifying weapons ever used in combat, the flamethrower. First, let's understand why the Americans needed this island so badly. And then, we'll see how a weapon that sprayed burning fuel became the only way to win this impossible battle. Iwo Jima was just 8 square miles of volcanic ash and rock, but its location made it priceless. It sat exactly halfway between American bomber bases in the Mariana Islands and the Japanese mainland, about 750 miles from each. American B-29 bombers flying to bomb Japan had to fly right past Iwo Jima, and the Japanese used it as an early warning station. They would radio ahead to warn the mainland that bombers were coming. Even worse, Japanese fighters based on the island would attack the B-29s both on their way to Japan and on their way back, when they were damaged and low on fuel. But there was another problem that was killing American aircrews. These bombing runs to Japan were over 3,000 miles round trip. That's like flying from New York to Los Angeles and back without stopping. When a B-29 took damage over Japan, which happened often, it faced a terrible choice. The crew could try to make it back across 1,500 miles of open ocean on damaged engines, or they could ditch in the water. Most who ditched were never seen again. However, if the Americans had Iwo Jima, damaged bombers could land there for repairs. Military planners calculated that capturing this island would save thousands of aircrew lives. But taking Iwo Jima would require something different. The Marines couldn't just bomb and shell their way to victory this time. They would need men on the ground, carrying weapons that could reach into places no bomb or bullet could touch. And the Japanese knew exactly how valuable Iwo Jima was. What they did to prepare for the American invasion would turn the island into a nightmare that would require the most terrifying close combat weapons to overcome. The Japanese commander on Iwo Jima was Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, and he did something no other Japanese commander had done before. Instead of meeting the Americans on the beaches, where they would be destroyed by naval gunfire, he ordered his men to dig. For months, Japanese soldiers and Korean laborers carved an underground fortress into the volcanic rock. They created 11 miles of tunnels, some running 75 feet deep. These weren't simple trenches. They were complete underground cities with command posts, hospitals, and ammunition storage. The tunnels connected over 1,500 bunkers, pillboxes, and gun positions. Some chambers were large enough to hold 400 men. They even installed electricity and ventilation systems that filtered out poison gas. The volcanic rock was perfect for this. Soft enough to dig through, but strong enough to absorb explosions. The Japanese also did something clever with their cave entrances. They made them small, sometimes just big enough for one man to squeeze through. They angled them to deflect explosions and built multiple exits so soldiers could escape if one entrance was blocked. Traditional American tactics wouldn't work here. Naval shells just bounced off the volcanic rock. The Marines would need a weapon that could literally pour death into these tunnels and bunkers. They would need something that could turn these underground fortresses into ovens. And the Marines had just the weapon for this job. We're talking about the flamethrower, a weapon that could shoot liquid fire up to 80 feet, turning the air itself into an inferno. But before we get to how these weapons changed everything at Iwo Jima, you first need to understand what the Marines were walking into when they hit those beaches. On February 19th, 1945, the invasion began. The Marines expected the Japanese to fight them on the beaches like they had on every other island. But something strange happened. As the first wave of Marines hit the black volcanic sand, there was almost no resistance. Kuribayashi was waiting. He let 20,000 Marines come ashore. He let them crowd onto the beaches with their equipment and supplies. Then, when the beaches were packed with men and machines, he gave the order. Suddenly, the entire island erupted. Machine guns, mortars, and artillery opened fire from hidden positions. The Marines were caught in the open with nowhere to hide. Casualties mounted fast. By the end of the first day, 2,400 Marines were dead or wounded. And this was just the beginning. This is where the flamethrower became essential. The M2 flamethrower was basically a metal backpack filled with 4 gallons of thickened gasoline. It had 2 tanks strapped together, with a third tank of compressed gas to push the fuel through a hose to the gun. When the operator pulled the trigger, it shot a stream of burning fuel that could reach 60 to 80 feet. The flame burned at over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt steel. And unlike bullets or explosives that needed a direct hit, fire could flow around corners, seep through cracks, and fill entire cave systems with unbearable heat and smoke. But using one was basically a death sentence. The tanks weighed 70 pounds when full, making the operator slow and clumsy. Worse, he had a massive target on his back, literally. Those fuel tanks were like wearing a bomb. One bullet in the wrong place, and the whole thing could explode. Japanese soldiers quickly learned to spot the distinctive shape of the flamethrower tanks and would concentrate all their fire on that man. They knew if they could kill him before he got close enough, they'd be safe. That's why flamethrower operators had an average life expectancy of just 4 minutes in combat. The standard flamethrower fuel didn't work well on Iwo Jima. The mixture was too thin. It would splash off the volcanic rock instead of sticking to cave walls. Marine engineers had to modify the napalm formula right there on the island. They mixed the fuel with more thickening agents, creating a jelly-like substance that would cling to surfaces and burn longer. The original M2 flamethrower could only fire for about 8 to 9 seconds total before running empty. That's not much when you're trying to clear a fortified position. So Marines developed new tactics. They learned to fire in short bursts, half a second here, a full second there, to make their fuel last through multiple cave clearings. On February 23rd, Corporal Herschel Woody Williams showed what one man with a flamethrower could do. His rifle squad was pinned down by Japanese pillboxes that had already killed several Marines. Williams strapped on a flamethrower and went forward alone. For 4 hours, he attacked one Japanese position after another. When his flamethrower ran empty, he went back for a new one, then another. He used 6 flamethrowers that day. At one pillbox, Japanese soldiers charged out with bayonets to stop him. Williams killed them with a burst of flame, then destroyed their position. He cleared a path for his unit to advance, actions that would earn him the Medal of Honor. The Marines also mounted flamethrowers on Sherman tanks, creating what they called Zippo tanks. These could carry 290 gallons of fuel instead of the 4 gallons in a backpack unit. The flame could reach out to 150 feet and burn continuously for over 2 minutes. Flamethrower operators never worked alone. They couldn't. While the operator focused on aiming his weapon, he was completely vulnerable. Marines developed a system where riflemen would form a protective circle around the flamethrower man. They'd lay down covering fire to keep Japanese soldiers from shooting him while he moved into position. Sometimes it took an entire squad just to get one flamethrower close enough to use it. The Japanese tried everything to stop the flamethrowers. They dug their cave entrances in zigzag patterns so the flames couldn't reach deep inside. They built false tunnels that led nowhere, wasting precious fuel. Some positions had multiple levels connected by vertical shafts. When flames entered the lower level, soldiers could escape upward and wait it out. At night, Japanese engineers would sneak out and place mines specifically in paths they thought flamethrower teams would use. But the most desperate Japanese tactic happened when they realized a flamethrower was approaching their position and escape was impossible. Soldiers would sometimes rush out in suicidal attacks, hoping to kill the operator before he could fire. After 36 days of the most brutal fighting in Marine Corps history, Iwo Jima was finally secured on March 26, 1945. The cost was staggering. Nearly 7,000 Marines were dead and 20,000 wounded, almost 1 in 3 who landed on the island. The Japanese lost over 18,000 men. Only 216 surrendered. The rest fought to the death in their underground fortress. But the flamethrowers had done their job. Military analysts later calculated that without them, American casualties would have been double, maybe triple. The island simply couldn't have been taken by conventional weapons alone. The capture of Iwo Jima immediately proved its worth. By the end of the war, over 2,400 damaged B-29 bombers made emergency landings there. That's nearly 27,000 airmen, whose lives were saved because they didn't have to ditch in the ocean. Many of those bombers were so shot up, they never would have made it back to the Marianas. The very first B-29 to use the airfield landed on March 4th, while the battle was still raging. The pilot later said that without Iwo Jima, he and his entire crew would have died in the Pacific. The flamethrower operators who survived rarely talked about what they did. They knew they had helped win a crucial battle, but the memories of using such a terrible weapon stayed with them forever. Thanks for watching.